All right, everybody, here we go. It is that time. We are on to the very next episode of Seed of Faith. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest for you this day. All right, and I want you to put your hands together. A warm welcome for none other than Michelle Peterson.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me. This is an interesting one, how this came together. First of all, I'm going to let you do a lot more of the explaining of me instead of me trying to like synapses what it is you do, because it's very complex and it has a very sensitive way of talking about it. So heads up, everyone, this episode is going to be addressing adult topics. So if your kids are watching, that's up to you. You're the parent. But just so you guys know, there is going to be some sensitive kind of stuff that's addressed in this because of how this all came about. So let's talk. That hopefully that gets their attention, draws them in.
Right. There you go.
No, but so we're going to play a quick video just so you guys can get a quick. So she doesn't have to sit here and re-explain everything too much, and we'll show this quick video. That way you guys are going to be able to follow right along. So here, check this video out real quick.
NBC5 investigates. Imagine discovering that your teenager has been receiving thousands of text messages from a teacher, many sexually explicit, dozens in the middle of the night. You might believe your child would tell you if this happened, but as NBC5's Phil Rogers discovered, that's not always the case.
The story unfolded here in Morris, southwest of Chicago, as middle America as it comes.
He wanted to make a sex video, put it straight out there.
Andrew Kozik says he had begun texting Stefan Belegno, a teacher here at Morris High School, because he was having trouble on the baseball team. But before long, he says Belegno was offering him money for oral sex.
It started off at $500 and then $1,000 and then $1,500.
But Andrew never told anyone, and no one knew until his mother heard him talking to Belegno on the phone.
He has no business calling you at 11 o'clock at night. That's completely inappropriate.
When she learned the two had been communicating by text message, Andrew's mother went to her computer and logged into the family's account. She found thousands of messages.
I was just sick because I knew in my heart, I'm like, this isn't just regular text messaging.
The family went to police, who searched Andrew's phone and found nearly 6,000 messages between the two. But only about a tenth of those could be recovered. And indeed, they are troubling. We can't read some of the more graphic messages, but among the more benign, the teacher writes, "When does the kissing begin?" "Icky," the student says. "How about if we just go at it and not video it?" the teacher declares. And on another occasion, "When you're 18, we can give each other everything."
Sometimes males to bond with males are crude.
Raymond Wigel is Belegno's lawyer. He insists the teacher was only trying to help Andrew through a bullying incident on the baseball team.
You say that these text messages do not indicate criminal activity. They certainly indicate stupidity for a teacher to be sending these messages.
Absolutely.
Wigel says he and his client concede bad judgment, but they point to the thousands of other texts no one read, as well as huge gaps in the transcripts.
There's a stupid intent, but there was not an evil intent to have sex with this young man.
I don't care what context you put it in. When you offer somebody money for sex, that's solicitation.
So why didn't Andrew tell someone? Records show at one point he even told a DCFS investigator the teacher's messages had not crossed the line.
Why'd you tell him?
I didn't want him to lose his job. I didn't want him to get in trouble.
Belegno was found guilty of indecent solicitation of a minor and unlawful grooming. He is to be sentenced next month.
I want him to have to register as a sex offender. The jail time would just be icing on the cake.
Michelle Peterson says she and her son wanted to talk to us to stress the importance of reporting incidents like this. 18 of these texts were after midnight, 15 after 3 a.m. The Grundy County State's attorney says he believes it's a cautionary tale about giving children digital technology this Christmas without firm guidelines on how it will be used.
All right, so that video brings a little more clarity to the entire situation. What ended up happening was I didn't hear about you from that particular thing. That's not how I saw you. I saw you because you were speaking about that you had just went to Mar-a-Lago. Like you were involved, like you were one of the few people selected to go to Mar-a-Lago. And I'm like, wait, who? What? You're like a local person? Where am I at? Mm-hmm. So that kind of already got my attention. That being said, all of a sudden, as I'm talking to other people, other guests, for example, Kevin Gardner, pastor of the Fox River Lutheran Church, he definitely was like, you got to talk to Michelle Peterson. And he's like, you got to talk to her. Like, there's a lot going on there. And so then when I put 2 and 2 together, I'm like, wait, who's this lady, local lady that went to Mar-a-Lago? What's going on? What did she do? What's the situation? And then I got to meet you, checked out some of your website, realized, oh, I see. Yeah. So with that being said, we, played some videos here helping kind of prep some people. But can you, we're going to talk about what it is you're doing. But honestly, there's a part of this where I am interested in just actually like your personal testimony too. I know people want to know what's going on, right. And I do want to talk about that. But I also just kind of want to get like, who are you, Michelle Peterson? Like, where did you come from, and what's your story? When did you get saved? And when? Well, we know when you got this calling to do this, but like, what's your relationship with the Lord like and all that? Because I'm also interested in that. I want to see a lot of the things that you're doing come to fruition. But I also want to see how God is not just working through you, which he is, but how he's working in you and how that looks too. Mm-hmm. So we'll get into that. But before we get into all that, can you kind of explain a little bit? So you're local. You're from around here. All of a sudden, you're on national television. You're being interviewed for. Well, I'll let you explain it a little bit, because I'm trying to find like the ways to like. Right. I'm also trying not to get censored. So I'm like, what are the right words that YouTube allows?
Right.
So,
right.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. So I actually live in Morris, Illinois, and back in 2010, my son was being groomed by a male teacher. And just to explain to people what grooming is, you have regular grooming where you groom your child to be, a good, wholesome person, have good morals. You groom someone to be a CEO of a company or whatever. But this is unlawful grooming, whereby somebody is trying to gain the trust of another person to do something nefarious to them. And typically when it's an older person with a younger person, it's usually, to have sex with that child. So, but they don't only groom the child, they groom usually the family, and they'll groom the community. So people are always afraid of, the white van syndrome, right? You're going to have this white van roll up and take your kid. It's typically not a stranger. It's usually somebody that you know.
Member,
it's a family member.
Neighbor.
It's a neighbor. It's a teacher, pastor. It could be anybody, right? So people that are close to you, and they try to gain your trust, and you'll never think that there's anything going wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened in this situation. So back in 2010, in October, my husband and I had just come home from a funeral, and it was about 10:30 at night, and I went and knocked on my son's door to tell him good night. He's 16 at the time, and he was sleeping, so I shut the door, went about my business, getting ready for work for the next day. And then I heard him about a half hour later talking, and he was extremely annoyed. I could tell he was upset, and he was mad. And he said, I don't know how often you want me to call you. You know that I'm busy. I'm working 2 jobs. Mm-hmm. I'm taking a class. He was taking a class in college at the time, too, as a junior in high school. And just he was very busy. And then all of a sudden I heard him say, I'll meet you in your classroom tomorrow and pick up those paintballs. And I'm like, okay.
Red flag.
Right. So my heart kind of just sunk. And I knocked on the door and I said, who are you talking to? And he told me, excuse me, he said he was talking to his baseball coach. And I said, why is he calling you at 11 o'clock at night? That's completely inappropriate. And he said he was just on his way back from watching Sunday Night Football and was getting tired. I said, again, why is he calling you? And so you need to hang up the phone. So he hung the phone up, and just like the video said, I went immediately to my computer, looked up the phone number he was talking to, and then went and looked at the text messages and saw thousands of messages. And I was just sick. Like, I just knew that there was something wrong, right? And my son and I had been pretty close. I was a single mom for a long time. We got divorced. I got divorced from my first husband when he was 4 and didn't get remarried until he was 10. Okay. And so, we were very close. I never thought for one second that he would never tell me something, right, of this nature. And so I, printed off about 3 weeks worth of text messages, came out to be about maybe a 1/4 inch thick, took it to the principal's office the next day, and I said, I think we have a problem. Told him what was going on, and he kind of sat back in this chair, kind of exasperated. And he's like, well, I think there might be maybe a couple of the kids I could even think about. And then he was kind of kicking himself a little bit. He goes, I just gave him a teacher's award 2 weeks ago. So when I say they groom the community, that's part of it, right? So he would volunteer for extracurriculars. He would be the guy that would, pick up the slack and do things. So that way people would never think that he was, doing anything like this. And so he said that he would talk to both of them and see what was going on. So he met with each of them individually. I went back and talked to him later that afternoon, and he said they're both denying any wrongdoing, that it was just regular text messaging. And I said, okay, so as a mandatory reporter, are you going to report anything? And he said, well, honestly, because they're both denying anything, I have nothing to report. I can't do that. But you're Andrew's mom. You can open up a DCFS investigation whenever you want.
Okay.
And so for people out there, DCFS is the Department of Children and Family Services across the country. Some people know as CPS or Children Protective Services. So I left there, went to a local church. I wasn't going to Fox River at the time, but went to a local church in Morris and talked to the pastor there and told him what was going on. And he said, this really is kind of out of your hands. You need to turn this in. So I actually sat on it for another week and kind of prayed about it because, this is somebody's livelihood. This is their life. This is,
right.
You want to make sure that what you're thinking is really what's happening. You don't want to ruin somebody's life over this. So I waited another week and I did call DCFS, and then about another 6 days later, I still hadn't heard anything. They're supposed to be out within 24 hours. And I called the local office, and it's the Will Grundy County DCFS, and I got a hold of them, and they said, well, the person who has your case file is on vacation, so it's sitting on her desk. I'm like, so that's how this goes. Like, so nobody picks up that file? Like, what if my son was actually being hurt,
right.
And so I called the director of Illinois for the Department of Children and Family Services, and she actually picked up the phone, and I told her what was going on. I could hear her tapping in the background, and she said, you reported this 6 days ago. They should have been out within 24 hours. I said,
wow.
I'm aware. And she said, well, somebody will be there today.
Okay.
And she goes, if they're not there today, I want you to call me back. So I get a call back about 10 minutes later from the local office. They said that they would send somebody out actually the next day. They didn't have somebody that day, and the next day worked better for me. I'm a physical therapist and I do outpatient, so I had patients scheduled, so it would have been easier. Plus I could have, give my son a heads up, hey, they're coming to talk to you tomorrow. And then I left her a message, let her know what was going on because she didn't pick up that time when I called back. And then I got a call about another 10 minutes later from the school saying that DCFS was on the way. So she must have called them and said, you will get there today. So by the time I got to the school, they already had my son in a room. And so the person from DCFS was already talking to them and talking to him. And they also had a counselor in the room with him from the school. So he wasn't alone, but they didn't wait for me to get there. Mm-hmm. And as I was walking out, he was walking out, and he was very angry with me. He just wanted this to really just go away. I think he thought once I found out that it would just stop and he could move about his business. And that's not how this was going to go down because he wasn't the first. And so whoever would have gone through this before us, if they would have done something, we wouldn't be going through it. And so really, though, at the time, I had no idea what was in these text messages. So I go in and I meet with the DCFS investigator, and she said, I don't know why it was so imperative for us to get out here so quickly. She said, this just seems like benign text messaging. So I handed her the 3 weeks worth of texts, and it's no verbiage. It's just the phone number, just like your phone bill. The phone number's back and forth. And so she looked at them, and I said, you might want to look at the times that are coming in and out and how many text messages are coming in before my son responds. Because sometimes there'd be 10, 15, 20 messages coming in, and then my son felt at that point he needed to respond because this is somebody in a position of authority. And she looked through and she said, oh. And I said, this might not be the worst thing you've ever seen, but this is the worst thing I'm going through right now, and shame on you for making me feel bad for calling you. And I was not very nice about it. I was kind of annoying.
I feel like it's hard to be nice when it comes to your kids. I don't know. I struggle.
Yeah, I was not very nice. And the counselor looked at me and she's telling me to calm down. I said, I don't need to calm down. You guys should not have talked to him until I got here, So I left there. Nothing was happening. And here's the thing is I was that mom that I would look at my son's phone all the time. So 3 or 4 times a week, I'd take his phone because it's my phone. And I would look at his text messages, his apps, his emails, those sorts of things. So he knew that I was doing that. So I never saw one over 6,000 messages because he would delete them when they came in because he knew that I was looking at his phone.
Yeah.
So I then started off trying to find somebody. I do a lot of research, and I was trying to find somebody who could get the messages off the phone. Mm-hmm. And after, a week or 2, I was able to find somebody in Joliet.
This is like private investigator stuff.
He was a detective.
This is hardcore.
Yeah, so he was a detective in Joliet.
The love of a mom.
Right. Yes. Don't mess with our children. Right.
All right, keep going. Sorry.
So that's okay. So get a hold of this guy, and he said, yes, this is what I do. And I got a hold of the detective because I had opened up an investigation with Morris Police Department just on a hunch that I thought something was wrong. And I told him about this guy. He goes, I forgot about him. He just did an in-service with us a year ago. And he said, for chain of custody, I'm going to have to get the phone from you, and then I can take it to him. So I let my son have his phone through the weekend at that time. And at 10 o'clock at night, I said, I need your phone. I said, I found somebody who can get those messages off your phone. And his face just went green. And I said, is there something you need to tell me? He goes, I can't tell you. He wouldn't even look at me. He couldn't look me in the eye. He goes, I can't tell you, but I'll talk to the principal tomorrow and then to the detective. I said, okay. So before he went to bed, though, we had a talk about suicide because at that point, you just don't know where your kid is mentally, So I said, that's not worth taking your life over. And if this teacher does something to himself, that's not on you either.
Right.
And so I didn't sleep much that night. I kind of stayed up keeping vigil over his room and just, was worried about what was going to happen. So I was up all night. But then we went to the school the next day, and he was in the room or in the office with them for about 3 hours, telling them everything. And the principal came out and he said, well, you were spot on with what you were thinking. And he said, we're going to open up our own DCFS investigation at this point. And he said, Andrew wants to tell you himself what happened. And we've kind of talked to him and told him how he could do that. But I will be here all day. So if you need to come back or if you have any questions, feel free to come back. So we go home, and Andrew told me where he had wanted to make a sex video with him. And he would refer to his body part as my little guy and ask him, am I ever going to get to see the little guy? Never told me about the money offer. So I went back to the school to talk to the principal, and he said, so what did he tell you? And I told him, he said, well, he didn't even tell you the worst part. He said he actually offered him money for oral sex, $500, $1,000, and then $1,500. So I was just sick, right?
Yeah,
so at that point, At that
You're
point,
telling
they put
this
him
story,
on.
by the way, very like this, but in my mind, this is like a roller coaster of emotions. Like this is like shaking hands, anxiety, nauseous, want to puke. Like this is like, I already know that, but I get it. Like you're telling it you've done this. This is not your first rodeo, probably telling this story either. So, but I get it. Like there's a lot going on there.
Oh, there's
Holy
a lot
smokes.
going on. So our house was, it was so tumultuous at the time. It's hard to explain to people. Like you go through all of these emotions, right? And I'm trying to protect my kid. My husband, who's not his father, is a stepfather, is like questioning why he was answering these text messages, And that's the thing, is like we should never blame the child. Like this wasn't his fault. This guy's in a position of authority, and he felt like he needed to answer to him, and then, he gains his trust, and he tries to get him to, think that he's one of the good guys. And there were so many stories he told, that, when he grew up, he'd lost his parents. And so he's like pulling on my son's heartstrings and all of these things. And, you're trying to like go through the day and be like a normal person when all that's going on in the background behind you. Like it was horrible. I mean, it literally took me probably at least 4 or 5 times to tell this story on a podcast without breaking down. Yeah. And at times something will get me every now and then. And then I'm a little done. But so anyway, so the principal.
I have tissues over there.
Yeah.
So. We're good.
When the principal, though, came out and he said they were going to open up their own DCFS investigation, he then said that they would put him on paid administrative leave because it's, the teachers are union, so they have contracts. So it was paid administrative leave.
Okay.
And still, though, he hadn't been charged with anything at this point. And they took my son's phone and took it to the detective. He had the phone for about 2 months, and he was having trouble because Apple or iPhone had just done an upgrade, so he couldn't get the messages off the phone. He was having a tough time. And just so people are aware, these phone companies don't have to help. Even if they have a court order, they drag their feet helping, trying to pull messages off these phones, even though it was my phone. And after a few months, he couldn't get the messages, so our detective took it down to the Illinois State Police. They then had the phone for about 3 or 4 months. Now we're almost a year after overhearing that first conversation.
Right.
And I ended up having a friend whose husband was in the Secret Service at the time. And she said, I really need to get you hooked up with our other friend, and he's on a pedophile task force. And so she said, no, I'm telling you, this whole time, that God's hand has been all over this, right? Because how many people have friends whose husbands are in the Secret Service, first of all?
Well, I have no idea. Probably
lot,
very little.
right? And
I don't know any.
let alone one who is on a pedophile task force.
Right.
And so he meets with me at their house, and he said, this isn't enough for just one person. They want you to go away, meaning the Grundy County State's Attorney. Like, they don't want to have to put all the work into this for just one kid.
Right.
And he goes, but you need to stay in their face. You need to keep going down there. Let them know you're an educated woman. You're not going anywhere. He goes, I'm going to give you 2 business cards. You keep one for yourself. You give one to them, and tell them that if they don't have the messages off that phone in the next 7 days, you're going to turn it over to the feds. I'll have them off of there in 15 minutes. Okay? So the next day I go down and I do that, and 3 days later we had the text messages, which leads me to believe they probably had them.
There's a lot of bureaucracy and politics, and man, that's so evil.
Right. And then you've probably researched a lot of stuff over the last few years. I mean, COVID has woken up a lot of people to what the evils of the world are. And so I had been researching. I mean, there's a lot of times that these jurisdictions, the police department, the sheriffs, a lot of times they're involved, right? So now I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, so is somebody at the courthouse, were they involved? I have no idea. Were they protecting somebody? I don't know. But that's where my head started to go.
Where we're at
these
this
last
point,
few years.
Trust has been broken, and it's like,
right.
I don't want to say paranoia, but how could you not have some sort of trauma from exactly what you've just been through,
right,
to the point where it breaks trust with other people that you would just maybe have given the benefit of the doubt, no more get that.
Right.
They don't get that no more.
Right. So then we get these messages back. And so I end up meeting with 2 assistant state's attorneys. My husband and I go into the courthouse in Grundy County. We're in this huge room at the courthouse, and big conference table, right? They're on one side, we're on the other. And in front of them is a stack of papers about 1.5 inches thick. And so there was an older gentleman. He said, I just don't know that we have enough to go on. He said there's a lot of gaps in the transcripts, because when you pull the messages off the phone, when other messages come in, it's going to push other messages out. So that's why there were gaps in the transcripts, because it had been so long since they were able to get the messages off the phone.
Right.
And so then I said, well, are those the messages? And he said, yes. I said, can I see them? And they both looked at each other like they weren't expecting that. And they're like, now what? And I said, well, here's the thing. I said, those are my messages. It's my phone. So if you're doing nothing with them, I'm leaving today with all of that.
Because that's that in itself is power.
Yeah.
They're having that is evidence.
Right.
And so they can bureaucracy any red tape they want, or you start putting that out publicly.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm just
That's
getting...
okay. It's true though. That's that's where my head was, right? Like, I need to see these messages. So they let me see them, and I start flipping through them. I'll never forget. It was slow motion. I was very slow. Tears are dripping from my face because it wasn't just those 3 things that were in there. There were all kinds of other messages. But even though there were messages missing, where he offered him money, wanted to make a video, referred to his body part as my little guy, all of that was in there. So I pushed it back very slowly, and I had been pretty compliant, pretty even keeled up to this point. And I slammed my hand on the table, and I started yelling like I've never yelled before. I said, you have got to be kidding me. And I looked at the older gentleman, and I said, you have grandkids that go to this school. You're okay with this guy teaching your children? And then looked at the other guy. I said, you have kids that are going to be coming to this school? I said, you are okay with this guy teaching your kids? I said, you guys need to do your jobs. And I was so hot. My husband started kicking me under the table, and I said, you kick me one more time, I'm kicking you out that door. Like, I don't ever remember yelling so loud in my life. And they really, I think, didn't know what to do with me. And they're like, ma'am, you need to calm down. I'm like, I don't need to calm down. You guys need to do your job. I'm like, you have all the proof right there. And then the older guy said, maybe if we just had one other kid that this happened to, that could corroborate that who this guy is. I said, so one's not enough? I said, that one kid is my kid. I said, so what does he got to do, sodomize my son before you do anything? And then you could hear a pin drop. So I left, and I said I wanted to meet with the actual state's attorney, because we're almost a year into this at this point. I had never talked to the state's attorney. So they said he was busy, of course. So the next day I called back at 8:01 the next morning, and I said I need to speak with the state's attorney, told him who I was. They said, well, he's busy. He doesn't have any openings on his schedule today. I said, that's fine. If he can't meet with me today, I'm coming down and picking up my phone. I'm picking up the text messages, and I'm going to take it to Lisa Madigan's office, who was the Illinois state's attorney at the time, and she was doing some stuff with trafficking. So I got a call back from himself 15 minutes later, said he'd meet with me that afternoon. So I printed off an article where he said he came back to Grundy County to protect the kids and families of Grundy County. And when I met with him, he said, well, I'm not really familiar with what's going on with your case. I said, we're almost a year into this. We're in the county seat. You went to this high school and you have no idea what's going on with my case. I said, that's a problem. I said, but I've heard that about you, that you really don't know what's going on in our county, and that the police are waiting for 4 other subpoenas for other cases that involve children that you have not given them. And so I then set the article down. I said, you said that you came back here to protect the children and families of Grundy County. I said, how about we start doing that?
So you made a new friend that day.
Oh, yeah. It was great. It set off a great relationship with him. And so anyway, so I left there. Next day, the detective calls me. He said, what did you say to him? So I told him, he goes, we just got 4 subpoenas we've been waiting for. And I said, glad I could help you with your cases, but I'm still getting nowhere with mine. And I said I was afraid I was going to have a target on my back because of what I said to him. He goes, not with the Morris Police Department. He said, I let everybody know that this is why we got those. It was because of you.
Shout out Morris Police Department.
Right. Morris Police Department was fantastic in this whole thing. And our detective, Eric Worden, he was awesome. And never, and again, because things were taking so long. I mean, I would call him, it wouldn't be every day, but within 1 month, and then the next month I'd call him and I'd be crying, and I'm like, this poor guy. He probably is like, oh my God, can we just get through this already? But he was fantastic through the entire thing, and I can't give enough of a shout out to him. And he's actually on the Grundy County Sheriff Department right now. So anyway, after that happens, months go by. So they have these messages, and they still aren't indicting him. And about, I want to say 4 or 5 months later, I get a call from the principal at the school. He said, I really need to talk to you. So I said, okay. I go down there. He said, I've been trying to get them to subpoena his personnel file because there's stuff in there they're going to want to see, but they won't do it. So I go trotting back down to the Grundy County State's Attorney's office. And this time I actually sat in the waiting room for almost 2 hours. And they, kept telling me he was busy. I'm like, that's fine. I'll wait until he has 5 minutes. And I think he thought he could wait me out, but that wasn't happening. And so I finally went in there and I said,
freeze you out?
Yeah. And I said, so this is, the principal called me and said that he's been asking you to subpoena the personnel file, that there's stuff in there you're going to want to see. He said, what could possibly be in there that we would need? I said, what skin is it off of your back? Can you just get it? So he subpoenas the personnel file, and the attorneys at the school don't want to release it to him until I come and sign off on it. And they said it was because of the HIPAA law, because my son was a minor and his name is all over this paperwork. So I go down there and I'm reading this. Now, this was a meeting that took place right after all of this came out. So it was with the principal, the superintendent, the teacher, and a union rep. And the principal had been a counselor before. So he asked him straight up, did you ever offer Andrew money for sex? Did you want to make a sex video? Did you refer to his body part as my little guy? And he said he put his head down and shook his head in affirmation and said yes. I'm like, we got him, right? So I sign it. I go down to the state's attorney's office, and I told him what was in there. And he said, well, why'd they let you see it? I said, because of the HIPAA law. He was like, they didn't have to do that. I said, honestly, they let me see it because they knew how much trouble I was having down here with you, and that if I didn't see it there with them, I'd never know what was in there. So if he's not arrested in the next 7 days, we'll have every major news station on your front lawn. And this is an election year. I doubt that you want that to happen. So he waited the full 7 days, and then he finally indicted him and charged him with solicitation of a minor. So he then is out on bond, of course, and then we go to status hearing. So status hearing each month, what's going on with the case, what's happening. So month after month after month, and nothing is happening. And so we end up in 2012 voted in a new state's attorney. That's when we voted in Jason Helland. And in January of 2013, our detective went and met with him and said, hey, this case has been, going on for a couple years. You really need to get with these folks and, work on this case because it's been hanging out there so long. So he met with me and my husband and my son. Now my son at this point is 18. He graduated high school in 2012. So he had already just finished his first year of college. And he meets with us and he said, I think we're going to have to take a plea deal at this point. He said, it's been so long, and they're going to say that you can't remember what happened and that there's gaps in the transcripts. And so at this point, then he'd still be able to teach. He'd have to, pay a fine, but he wouldn't have to register as a sex offender or anything. And so we end up, and I was not happy. I was so angry at the whole system. And we go to court in August of 2013, and he is supposed to take a plea deal, and by the grace of God, he decides he wants to take it to trial.
Oh. Nice.
Right. So that doesn't happen, but
Yeah.
God,
No. Yeah.
everybody was looking around each other. We're like, what did he just say?
You're like, shut up. Don't say
Right,
nothing.
right. So the judge, though, was ticked. Like, he lit up his attorney. And they said, you have dragged this family through the mud for the last 2.5 years. This young man was home from school. Over the summer, we could have gone to court at this time. Now we have to bring him home from school and go to court in October. So the judge was pissed.
Yeah.
And it was so great. And when you're in a court, like you can't show emotion at all. And I am like on the inside just wanting to scream hallelujah. Like finally somebody is laying it into these guys. Because they tried to pin it on me that I was just a vindictive mom. And so I was coming after him. Like, I have no reason to go after this guy.
Right.
And even to back up a little bit, as a physical therapist, I was doing some home health. So I was in his house treating a family member for home health physical therapy in May of 2010 when he started texting my son. I was also coaching softball at Morris High School. So he knew me as a healthcare professional, as a colleague, and then also as a parent, fully thinking that I would never do anything, right? And that I would never think anything, that he's just this great guy.
Right.
So I think that's one of the biggest lessons here is for parents, especially moms, if you have a gut feeling that something's wrong, something is probably wrong. And, go with that gut feeling and
Did you
don't ever give up.
suspect anything before you heard that first phone call that
No.
night where he was talking like, I'll see you at class?
No. Nope.
So there was nothing like in the way he was living or distancing or whatever. Everything was just, it's puberty.
Oh, no, right. There were things that were off. Never ever thinking this though, right? I thought, was he getting bullied at school?
Yeah.
What is happening? Like I wasn't for
He's
sure.
a teenager.
Right.
Maybe
He's a
this
teenager. I mean, he had a good group of friends, He wasn't ever the most popular kid in school, but he had a great group of friends. He loved going to school. He played baseball. He was just a normal kid. But he'd become withdrawn. He wasn't sleeping at night. I couldn't get him to get up to go to school in the morning. So these are all things that I should have been paying attention to.
But hindsight's 20/20. Sometimes those are
Absolutely.
hard to see, like in
Right.
the moment. They can be taken to so many other things.
Right.
But I was just curious on that particular part of it because I was wondering, exactly when that first red flag where you're like, I don't trust, and when you knew it was him. So I followed your process, like it was like through the phone number and figuring it out. But also what you're pointing out is, had you not continued to persevere and just push and push, like there were so many doors that were literally shut in your face, whether it was through people not wanting to cooperate, bureaucracy, politics, all of it. It was just like this constant, and you had to find out in stages, like you're
Right.
like you don't even get to find out everything like right when you want to find out. Like this is a slow
Right.
burn of like finding out what's really going on with your kid, what was really done, and then having to deal with that, taking years to even like come to the full thing. So he judged mad, he yelled at him, he says, let's take this to trial. You guys go to trial.
So, yep. But right, like before that, so after that happened, a couple days later, the state's attorney meets with us, and it's with, again, myself and my husband and my son. And he brings his first assist with him and says he's going to put him on the case. He's like, he's brilliant. This guy walks in and he's like completely disheveled. Like his tie's undone, his shirt's undone, his hair is all over the place.
It's like a character out
drives
of a movie.
a motorcycle to work every day. I'm like, okay. Right. And then he starts talking and he is so brilliant. And I'm like, Lord, I will never judge another book. Right. So he starts talking and he says, listen, there's a new law that came into play in Illinois just last month. So in Illinois, something that becomes law in 2012 becomes active either in January or July the following year, right? So that's how it works. So this law became active in July of 2013, and it was a grooming law. And he said everything that he did to you, your son, this family, the community, everything's in that law. He said, but there's no precedent set. It's going to be very difficult to get. He said, but that's what we're going to go for. So, okay, so we go to court in October of 2013. Now, the defense had put me down as a witness for them to keep me out of the courtroom. My son, though, was on trial, like he was on the seat, I guess, whatever, in the witness stand for 4 hours, I think, between the two of them. And then he had to come in the witness room with me So I told him, I said, make sure you tell that attorney thank you, because I just got, 8 hours with my son uninterrupted, with no phone, no TV, no nothing, with my 19-year-old
lock
kid.
you up back there.
Right, with my 19-year-old kid. So I got to spend some quality time with him. We played cards, we played board games, that would have never happened otherwise.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah, so trying to find
Finding
the silver
the
lining.
good. Yeah. It's
Right.
funny how that works out.
Right.
Where all things work out for those
Yep.
who.
So we go to court and then end up getting a conviction of solicitation of a minor and unlawful grooming. And it's the very first grooming conviction in the United States.
Wow.
Yes.
You learn something new every day.
Yes.
So your case that went to trial was the very first grooming case ever?
Ever in the United States.
That seems... I'm happy for you, but it seems like that should have happened a long time ago. I don't
Right.
understand. Like, why
Right.
is that the first in 2013? Or
Yeah, in 2013, because there were no grooming laws in any states.
There were no
So
grooming laws?
Nothing would happen to these pedophiles unless they actually touched or defiled a child. Then something would happen to them.
So if they got caught having the conversations and I want to see your little guy,
Nothing.
that's not enough.
No. Nothing would happen
That's
to them.
insane.
It is insane. So,
I'm kind of just sitting here kind of like, I don't understand that.
I know. Yeah.
But now it's illegal.
So not in every state.
Okay.
So let me finish the story.
Okay.
So then,
I'm jumping ahead. I'm
I
getting
know.
to the good
So,
stuff.
and I want parents to understand that. So we get this conviction. Now my 19-year-old son has to go back to school in New Jersey because he went to school in New Jersey for college. So he goes back to school and he's spiraling out of control because
There's a lot going on there.
he lost this guy's job. That's what he thinks, that he caused this to happen. And again, that's all part of the grooming process, right? And he had been going to counseling. I put him in counseling in high school right out of the gate. We were all going to counseling. And the counselor discharged him after about 6 weeks. I went in and met with him. I said, what are you doing? He's like, well, I think he's fine. I'm like, he's not fine. I can tell you right now, he's not fine. I said, but he's very smart. I said, please don't take offense to this, but I think he's smarter than you because he's telling you everything that you want to hear so that you'll discharge him. And that's exactly what happened. So when he goes back to school, he is defying authority. He's drinking. He is just out of control. And I get a call from the dean of students telling me, that he had gotten in a fight the night before. And so I told her what happened. This was about 3 weeks after trial. Told her what was going on. And she's like, okay. So she helped get him into some counseling there. Now, my son had been wanting to be a Marine ever since he was 8 years old. So he thought that if he went to counseling, that would keep him out of the Marine Corps.
Right.
But it doesn't. If you get ordered to go to counseling because you've done something wrong, that's a different story. But when you're going to counseling to try to better yourself, that's not going to keep you from getting into the military. So he went and did some counseling, came back, finished his second semester, was doing okay, not great. And then the following year, he went back for his junior year, and he was just not wanting to be there. He just wanted to go in the Marine Corps and be done. And so we talked, and that's exactly what he did. He went in the Marine Corps and went in for 5.5 years and did intelligence for them. He was a linguist for them, so he speaks Russian and Spanish fluently.
Nice.
Yeah, he's really, like, I always tease, that this teacher had the right kid, but he had the wrong family, because my son has a very good heart. He will help anybody, do anything for anyone, and it's just who he is,
Right.
and never wants to hurt anybody. But, we had to have a talk, too, about boundaries and that, you can't let people take advantage of that, because I'm very similar. Like, I will do anything for anybody, and I've had to set up boundaries on walls and, not let people take advantage of that. And so I had to have that talk with him. And so anyway, he goes in the Marine Corps, and he started having some issues there too. Ends up going to counseling again while he's in the Marine Corps, and found a great counselor. And this woman was all over him. Like, she's like, she even told him, she goes, you're probably one of the smartest people I've ever had to work with. And she said, but you need to tell me really what's going on. She goes, I see right through you. And so she really dug in and got down to the nitty gritty and to the depths of everything, and was able to help him. And so he got out of the Marine Corps and was in a much better place mentally. But it takes some work. I mean, he just turned 30 last year, and it's been 15 years of up and down counseling and just trying to deal with
Right.
all of this. So I want people to understand that just because he didn't touch my son doesn't mean he didn't have a profound effect on him and our family. So people need to understand that too, and make sure that they stay, vigilant in going to counseling and trying to take care of themselves, even if it's just a grooming incident and not an actual physical contact. But then fast forward now 10 years later. So in January of 2023, I went to a Clay Clark Reawaken event in Nashville, Tennessee. And these are events that were going on throughout the country since 2021 with General Flynn, and they were trying to get people to understand what was happening in our country and how we were, our DOJ has been corrupted and all these things in our medical field. And so they were trying to wake people up to what was happening and the truth of COVID and all of that, right? So I ended up going to a VIP dinner with one of my friends who was a speaker at the Reawaken. We got to be friends after going to a few of these. And so we're out to this dinner, and I end up meeting a trafficking investigator who is also a paralegal, and her name is Amy Coelho out of Texas. And she starts telling me about a case she just finished in November of 22. It took them 10 years to bust this case, but it was the La Luz del Mundo case. So it was a church cult where the women in the church prepare the kids in the church for the men in the church. And she said that they had just busted 23 different sex trafficking cells between Mexico and California. And you can actually learn more about that on Netflix. There's a documentary right now about the La Luz del Mundo church on Netflix.
What's it called?
La Luz del Mundo. It's just that. It's just, you put
Gotcha.
that into Netflix, it'll come up. And then she started telling me about the Larry Nassar gymnast, that she was one of their clients, and a couple other cases. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to tell her about my measly little case here from Illinois, right? And so I start to tell her, and she's like, hold on, are you from Illinois? And I said, yes. She goes, when was that? I said, 2013. He was actually sentenced in 2014. And she got tears in her eyes and grabbed my arm. And she goes, I need to get a picture with you and send this to my team. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she said, we use your case for every trafficking case we bust, including the ones I just told you about, because we have to prove the grooming in order to prove the trafficking, and you have the only grooming conviction in the United States.
So you set the precedence for them to use in other cases. I just got goosebumps.
Me
by the
too.
way.
Like,
I just got chills.
I was
for real.
we were both bawling. Like, the people around us were bawling that were listening to the story. And
So, okay, so that's huge. That's huge.
It is huge.
Like, because for those that don't understand, having the precedence of that grooming thing sets a legal criminal. You can come at things criminal. You can get warrants. You can get anything you need because now it's in a criminal field. And so, and because it's case law, now they have case law to refer to. Holy
Right.
smokes.
Right.
It's
crazy.
and I can't believe it took this many years to get a grooming law.
Right.
Okay.
So literally like 5 days before that, I am laying in bed till like 3 in the afternoon. I never do that. Crying and praying to God. I'm like, is anything I'm doing making a difference? Because I've been going to school board meetings, to county meetings, whatever, trying to get these masks off the kids during COVID, trying to alert people to what was really going on. And then 5 days later, he's like, let me show you how great I am. He puts Amy in front of me, right? And so she starts telling me this, and I tell her about everything I just told you, how hard it was to get everything to go through.
Right.
And she said, I'm going to tell you right now, she said, your tenacity and your son's willingness to come forward, you guys have saved thousands of lives.
Honestly.
And again, started bawling all over again,
Yeah.
right? And, I told her trying to get Andrew to come forward was hard. I mean,
Yeah,
he's
I can
16.
only imagine.
He didn't want to come forward
No.
and, face his friends and all
Yeah.
of this stuff, right?
Bullied.
So there was one day we were standing in our kitchen, and I told him, I said, you don't have to come forward. I said, but I'm going to send you to bed with 2 thoughts. There's 3 boys that live across the street, 4 that live down the street. If something happens to one of them and you could have stopped it, how are you going to face their family and face their parents? So he went to bed. That was another night that I was up keeping vigil over his room because not sure what he was going to do, right? So, but yeah, I mean, it was lots of nights like that trying just to get him to understand the gravity of this and that it wasn't just about us anymore and that God put it in our laps for a reason because he knew that we would take care of it, and so I'm talking to Amy. She said, listen, I think that we need to have an amendment put in. And she goes, I want to call it Andrew's Law. And she said it needs to be an amendment for a grooming law whereby somebody charged with grooming cannot take a plea deal. Because we thought that was the only reason that I had the only grooming conviction or that we had the only grooming conviction was because they were taking plea deals and getting out. So I ended up talking to General Flynn and gave him the information.
The General Flynn?
Yep, General Michael Flynn. This was at the Reawaken. So I talked to him 2 days after having that conversation with Amy, or maybe even the next day at the Reawaken. And he got me introduced to his sister, Mary Flynn O'Neill, who happened to be at that Reawaken, the first one she had ever gone to. Again, there's no coincidences in any of this.
No, I don't believe in coincidences.
No. God's been all over this.
Yeah.
His hand's been on it from the beginning. Even though, like, even through the whole thing, I'm like, why is this taking so long, right? But we needed that law, right, before anything could go through. So God's like, hold on.
Yeah.
But when, again, hindsight's 2020. So when you look back on it, now I can be like, okay, so I had to wait on him, right? And you get so impatient because you just want this to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, talked to Mary Flynn, told her what was going on, told her about our case. And then she said, I actually need a copy of your case because we have a case right now in Tennessee that we're helping with, and I need that case. Okay, so I come back home, give her the case, I emailed it to her, and then she introduced me to a paralegal out of Florida named Allie Hopper. And Allie, she started looking at the criminal code in Florida, couldn't find a grooming law. So she couldn't do an amendment of Andrew's Law because there was no grooming law to do an amendment on. Right? So then we start digging in. She and I and Amy, we got on a conference call, and we're like, we couldn't find a grooming law in other states. So now it became my mission to get a grooming law put in place in all 50 states. So Allie started working on a rep and senator in Florida. I went down and spoke at a GOP event. The rep was there. He took me back in the back room, wanted to hear the whole story. And he's like, we're going to make this happen. So now there is a grooming law in Florida, got signed into law by DeSantis last April.
Very cool.
Then we started working with a representative out of Mark Thompson out of Iowa. And Mark Thompson then pushed that grooming law through in Iowa, and it passed the House and the Senate unanimously. So we didn't even get any backlash in any of this. And that's the thing, is this should be a nonpartisan issue, right? We have both sides of the aisle have kids. Like, this should be a nonpartisan issue. It shouldn't be Republican, Democrat. And if somebody's pushing back against this, I would think that they're actually demonic.
Right.
Right.
I feel like any pushback is a red flag.
Right.
Period.
Right. Why are you wanting to not protect children?
Let it be said. Pushing back against laws that protect children and stuff like this, very clearly this stuff.
Right.
I don't see you the same.
Right. Right. Exactly. And so then I was talking with Allie and Amy. I said, we need to keep going. And I was reaching out to other states, see if anybody knew somebody personally. Because here's the thing. If you don't know a rep or senator personally, your email goes off into the ether. So I started going on podcasts and trying to get somebody to listen to see if anybody out there had a personal relationship with a rep or senator in their state that they could connect me with. And then we could get a bill in their state. So Arizona had an issue where there was a softball player being groomed by her coach. That representative reached out to Florida, also reached out to Iowa, used their laws, used the Illinois law. They then created a grooming law. So now Arizona has a grooming law based off all three of those laws. And then at the same time, after I did a podcast with a woman out of Georgia, she hooked me up with a woman named Susan Cobb out of Georgia. Susan's daughter had been groomed and then subsequently molested by a gymnastics coach at the YMCA.
Holy smokes.
Since she was like 10 or 11 years old. So like your daughter's age,
like
right around there, like little younger maybe, right? So she'd been trying to get a grooming law passed in Georgia for the last 3 years, and just this last year, she got a grooming law passed in Georgia. So in 1 year, we have a grooming law in Florida, Iowa, Arizona, and Georgia. And unfortunately, her daughter actually ended up committing suicide. She had come forward to tell her story, and people weren't believing her. And so she was really struggling. And all of those emotions with my son that we had talked about when I was talking to Susan just all came flooding back, because those were the things that I was trying to prevent from happening, right? So that was tough listening to her story. Like, I got off the podcast, or off the we had done like a go-to meeting, got off that meeting with her, and I just broke down. It was awful. I was crying. Like, this is because that's exactly what I didn't want to have happen to my son, and it happened to her daughter. So
God had it on your heart, though. It's crazy how you say, like, even as you tell your story, you're like, and I specifically had a conversation about this with him.
Oh, yeah.
Like, but that's not, do you understand, like, how afraid parents are to have conversations like that? Like, they think, like, talking about it in itself somehow brings it into fruition. Like, oh, if I talk about it, then it makes it happen. Like, I'm like, that's not how this works.
No. He needed to understand that I loved him more, right? And that nothing would ever be worth that.
Right.
Ever. And two, like when I started talking about this again, he was starting to get triggered, and we started having a clash with us.
What's that look like? What does getting triggered look like?
Like, he's like, Mom, he actually said this to me. He's like, Mom, now he was 29 at the time. He's like, Mom, you already saved me. You don't have to keep doing this.
So, okay.
Right. You don't have to keep doing this. I'm like, what about the other kids, Andrew?
Yeah.
You know, and I looked at him, I said, okay, Satan.
Get behind
and
me,
he's
Satan.
like, he just looked at me and said, what better way would Satan love to have me stop doing what I'm doing than to use the person I love the most to tell me to stop? And he just looked at me. And I left that conversation and drove home, and I was crying, and I'm like, Lord, you love him more than I do. Get him to understand this and bring him back, you know? And so he started going for more counseling. I went back for counseling so we could actually figure out how to handle this and get through it. And I was going to a Christian counselor, and I was really afraid. I mean, there's some woke counselors out there right now. So
there's mostly woke counselors.
I was really
out there.
concerned about who he was talking to, but he, by the grace of God, found somebody really good and somebody that he could open up to and
That's so
really
rare.
be honest with. Right.
And it doesn't work for everybody, you know,
Right.
honestly. It's
Yep. And he was having all sorts of pain. You know, as a physical therapist, I'm like, Andrew, I think your mental issues are actually manifesting as physical pain. I'm like, you might not only need to do physical therapy, but you need to go talk to somebody again. And so between physical therapy and counseling and just really working on himself, he's really gotten to a much better place. Like, he's doing so good finally right now. So he's in a good place. He still gets mad at me because, you know, I hover probably a little too much sometimes. Like, are you okay? Hey, I haven't heard from you in like 2 days. Can you please like get a hold of me? Right. Right. And that's the thing
so
is like,
funny.
everybody thinks like, you know, because actually one of the other baseball coaches, before all of this ever happened, he had referenced me as a helicopter mom. I'm like, really?
oh, yeah,
I said, because I actually hold my son accountable. Like, there was a time he lied. He lied to me and said that he had his term paper done. And this was when he was a junior. So all this was still going on at the time. And I could have let it slide and be like, oh, it's okay, honey, right? But if I did that, then that gives him that as an excuse all the time.
yeah.
And so he lied to me about that. They were leaving school early that day to go to a baseball game because their conference in Morris is ridiculous. So they were playing out in Dixon. So they were leaving like 1 or 1:30 in the afternoon to go play this game. So I got a hold of his coach. I said, he won't be going with you today. I said, he's like, okay, why? I said, because he lied to me and didn't finish his term paper. And he told the teacher that it was sitting at home on his jump drive. And he hadn't worked on a term paper. And so he's like, well, what would you like me to do with him? I'm like, send him to his English teacher. So I emailed her and said, he's coming your way. And so I told the baseball coach, I'm like, he's not allowed to practice or play until he has this done. So he pulled an all-nighter, got it done that night, and turned it in the next morning.
So you're kind of like that kind of mom. What I want to make sure, because I do have some questions about your like actual faith and testimony, but I want to make sure that we got to the point where basically essentially all of that led to laws and
Yes.
and eventually that's even what got you invited to Mar-a-Lago,
Right.
isn't it correct?
Right.
Because of just all of this, and
Yep.
now you've networked, and
Yep.
lawmakers are referencing you and needing you, and so you've created this huge network. In 2025, what's the next thing that's going on with this right now?
So we actually have an amendment put through with Jed Davis, who is my state rep. He put an amendment through last year, actually, but it never got called for a vote. And it's an amendment to the grooming law to make it so that somebody charged with grooming and or trafficking cannot take a plea deal. And it would also amend the current sex offender registry. So it would include places of business that are privately owned that cater all or in part to children. So places like Chuck E. Cheese, Dave & Buster's, private play areas at the mall. I saw this teacher working at a private play area at Louis Mall in Joliet 2 years after this happened. I went in to go get a new lab coat, and he was working at the place where I went to go get the lab coat. And I saw him at the register, and I like circled around and came back around. My heart's racing. I'm like PTSD going on, right? And I'm sitting there watching him, and I'm like, he's leaning on the counter and looking out into the mall at the children's play area that's right there outside of JCPenney's. I'm like, how is this even legal? He's on the sex offender registry. But because it's privately owned, it's not included in the registry. So the registry was written back in the 70s. Those places didn't exist. So I'm like, okay, we need to change the law then to include these places, because these are literal playgrounds for these people.
Yeah.
And so the other part of this amendment too would make it a lifelong registration and not just 10 years. So he only had to be on the registry for 10 years. This is the other thing I always forget to do on podcasts is say what happened to him. So he got sentenced to 180 days in jail, only had to serve the first 60, he would serve the other 120 if he violated probation. So he served 30 days because you get day for day good behavior. So instead of 60, he served 30. Had to pay like a $2,700 fine. He could no longer teach again and was on the sex offender registry for only 10 years. So he came off.
There's a time limit to that?
Yeah, so he came off the registry last May.
I didn't know people can just like bop off that after a few years. Like, oh, not for good behavior.
It all depends what they're charged with and what the actual
how bad
felony charges, right? So right back then it was a class 4 felony. Last year, the Democrats put through, it's now a class 3 felony for grooming in Illinois. So it's 5 to 25.
Cool.
Yeah, but it was an election year, so I think that's why they did that. And it's a hot topic.
And it was a hot topic.
It's a hot button item.
It popped in real.
Yep.
The last 8 years, it's been a thing.
So we want to make a lifelong registry. So we're working on that. He put it through last year, and there was a representative, Justin Slaughter, out of the 27th district. He never called it for vote. And so again, asking like why would you not call something like that for a vote? And the thing is, though, I found out from somebody he was told to stand down. So I'm like, well, who was he told to stand down by? Was he told to stand down by J.B. Pritzker or by the Speaker of the House? Who was he told to stand down by? And J.B. Pritzker, like their family, they're very involved in a lot of things. They're involved in the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum talks about age gap love and minor attracted people and wanting to normalize sex with children.
Sure does.
And he and his sister Penny Pritzker, his cousin Tom Pritzker, his other cousin James Pritzker, who now goes by Jennifer Pritzker because she's a transgender. He is a transgender.
Learn something new every day.
Yep. And he's a retired colonel from the National Guard. And he and his family have given the most money to Lurie's Children's Hospital for transgender surgeries. So
this is
right. So how are they involved? Because all of that, I think, is grooming, right? You try to normalize all of this in the school system,
right?
And you're grooming these kids so that if you do approach them with sex, they're not going to think anything of it because you're talking about it as if you're talking to them about the color of their hair.
So the grooming laws that are created, did you get any pushback? Because I'm curious, because I remember the main thing where grooming was coming up within the past 8 years wasn't like actually hearing a teacher groom, because you just don't hear much as that. It doesn't hit the news as much, probably due to all the protection and bureaucracy. But mostly the grooming stuff I was hearing about was like books, like books being in schools and stuff like that. Does these grooming laws at all, or is it just like they can't even apply this? But what if like a teacher giving these books? I'm just curious,
right?
Because these books can be very pornographic,
right?
Like or straight up like. Way more than people think. Like if you think like this is just some like right-wing talking point, Google it. Google the images of the books that were taken out and why they were wanting to take out the things that they talk about. So that to me that was like a type of like where legislation was promoting a type of culture that was making those kind of issues, those like grooming, all of those issues more acceptable.
Right.
Like, I'm sorry that took me so long to say. I feel like I'm dancing around my words.
I know.
Because of like YouTube and all that stuff. And I'm like, can I say these like strong words? But like essentially, like there was an entire culture within the legislation, top down.
Yep.
That was making it okay and making it easier for teachers to do this. Oh yeah, there's one book that was like teaching kids how to get on Grindr. And if you don't know what Grindr is, don't Google it because that'll be some terrible images.
Right.
But that's so at the same time you were fighting against it was also when I saw like a rise of it, like we're top down.
Right.
So it's very interesting that like what I'm hearing is like these laws didn't even exist. At the same time, I'm thinking there's laws that are like almost promoting it, and like allowing the plea deals and stuff like that. So then it just disappears. All this stuff just disappears.
Well, J.B. Pritzker is executive ordered so that you can't actually go after a librarian or a teacher for giving those out, right?
Right.
Because it would be grooming and it would be distributing pornography.
Right.
You look it up in the Illinois law, what they're doing is distribution of pornography. And he wrote an executive order protecting them. So if people want to know, like the book Gender Queer, for example, it shows boy on boy in a cartoon form, but it's very pornographic. But you can actually go to YouTube and put in Senator John Kennedy reading Gender Queer in a Senate committee hearing. You talk about disturbing. First of all, not just what's in the book, but having Senator John Kennedy reading it, right? So that's the thing. And so I actually took that clip and I played it at the Sandwich Library when we were pushing back about these books being on the shelf. And they had people there saying, oh, you just want to ban these books. We don't want to ban these books. We're not about book banning.
Yeah.
We just want them shelved appropriately. Put them in an adult section so that if a kid wants to check them out, a parent has to do that with them. Right?
Right.
Like, it's not about just giving something willy-nilly to them. They had that book sitting on a rotunda during Pride Month where any 5-year-old or 8-year-old could pick it up.
Right.
That's wrong. Like, it's pornography. It's showing boy on boy. If that's what you feel like your kid needs to do, then you need to be the one to check it out for them. And you read it with them and you have that conversation with them. We kept getting pushback from the library saying, well, you should know what your kids are doing. Okay, like your kids aren't going to like try to sneak things through
saying
on
that
you.
to you of
Come
all people
on.
is really funny.
Right.
Like, you should know what your kid's doing. I'm like, literally, we don't know, and that's the whole
Right.
point of this.
Right.
Like,
And while these phones and computers, like, they open you up to the world, they open you up to the world.
they do.
Right?
Yeah.
So now you have people on video games, you have people on Snapchat, people you don't know who are pretending to be a young boy or a young girl and friending your kids on Facebook or friending your kids on other social media or on the games that they're playing on these gaming systems. But I have a cousin in Montana, which leads to this bill that's coming up in Montana. So she has a 13-year-old, and she was listening to one of the podcasts I was doing. I was talking about an app that you can get for your phone. It's called the Bark app, B-A-R-K. So you can put it on your phone and on your kid's phone. You will get every text message going in and out of their phone on your phone, or you can set up for certain keywords, body parts, cuss words, so those types of things. It has GPS on there that can't be turned off. I think it's only like $99 for the year. You can put it on multiple phones. You can put it on tablets, on computers. It'll alert you if they're getting any messages coming in through any apps. You can actually stop certain apps from going on. You can make it so that they can only call you or call grandparents or call other parents, right? Like mom and dad, that's it. And they can't call their friends or text their friends. You can shut it down completely, take it off Wi-Fi, take it off data. Like, you have complete control of their phone from your phone. They also have a Bark phone, so you can buy the actual phone itself so that you can actually do that. So she did this for her 13-year-old daughter, bought the Bark phone after hearing a podcast. And it wasn't long after that she had gotten an alert that somebody was trying to message her daughter through Snapchat. And her daughter thought it was a 14-year-old boy. So she takes the phone to the local police department. They pretty much tell her, you just need to be a better parent. And so I said, take it to your local sheriff. They did the same thing. I said, take it to your local FBI. Takes it to the local FBI, and he had been trained on internet crimes against children. So it's ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children. And he took the phone. I said, now you need to go down to the school, because it was at the end of the school year. I said, get her Chromebook before they wipe it. See if he tried to get a hold of her on the Chromebook. And he had. So she takes the Chromebook to the FBI. They actually traced it back to a guy and his son in some other state. They were older.
Wow.
And so they were grooming her daughter. So this is grooming.
Yeah.
They can't do anything to them if it's in that state, right? Because it's grooming. Now they can't do anything to these people. However, because it crossed state lines, it is now a federal charge. There is a federal grooming law. So because it crossed state lines, they can be charged with grooming. So I told her, I said, you need to get a state rep or a senator there in Montana. Tell them your story. Tell them what happened. And we need to get somebody to sponsor this bill. So her boyfriend, his cousin, is a state rep. I said, call her. Tell her what happened to you. Tell her what happened to me. Send her to my website. Let her know what's going on. So she sponsored this bill. She was going to sponsor this bill initially. So she actually took it, because she's not in the committee that would handle this, and gave it. So she's a Democrat, new mom. So her emotions are high, everything's high, right? And so she wants to protect these children. She then gives the bill to a representative across the aisle. And so there's a Republican representative who's sponsoring this bill, and her name is Kathy Love. And she put it through committee last week, it actually went through the House and passed 100 to 0. Then it went to the senator, and the senator, I'm going to not mess his name up, it's Mike Yakowicz. Mike Yakowicz. And so it actually passed the Senate Thursday, 50 to 0.
Wow.
So now it's just waiting to be signed into law in Montana. But this is how this happens. Is like you have to have a personal relationship with
these people
to make this happen, right? And to get them to understand how imperative this is.
This is really this is like that whole, what's that old saying? It's about who you know or whatever. Like
right.
That's
Absolutely.
so true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there was actually another case up in Wisconsin that there was a teacher, I think it was like in 26 or 28, was grooming a 14-year-old girl. And I had seen it on the news. Somebody had sent me a clip of the news. I'm like, they don't have a grooming law. So now we need to get a state representative to sponsor a grooming law, right? So I tried to get a hold of some folks up there who sent me the clip and see if they can get me connected with a representative. I'm like, you know what? I'm going straight to the news station. And I got the lady that did the news story, went on to their webpage, got her phone number, left her a message at 8 o'clock at night. She texted me at 8:15 the next morning. She said, I'd love to talk to you. So we talked that day. They interviewed me that night by Zoom, and it played like a week later. And she also did an interview with some parents that were pushing back against this and wondering how they cannot charge this guy with anything. So now these parents are getting behind this bill. So I went up there, and this was in Kenosha, and we met with the assistant state's attorney. We met with the chief of police. We met with 2 state reps, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican, all around the same table with one of the parents. And now they're putting this bill forward. So it's all about like just getting this information out there and making sure people are willing to do this. And Indiana also has not giving up. And Indiana has a bill now that they're pushing through. There's a state rep from Indiana who lives in my hometown of Highland, Dan Durnock, and he's actually putting this through in Indiana. And I sent him the bill for Montana, which is unbelievable. So part of the bill for Montana is if somebody over the age of 18 is caught grooming a child 12 years old or younger, it's a 100-year sentence in prison.
Life.
No chance of parole for the first 25 years. And if they get out at that 25 years, it's a lifelong surveillance via satellite. You tell me if somebody's going to groom a child very easily or readily, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was only missing castration, but besides that was pretty solid.
Right.
That's pretty cool. You also, this is not a paid promotion, but you kind of sold me also on that whole bark thing, that whole thing. That's a weird subject for me because I have joint parenting issues with this, and I'm going to try to talk so I don't get myself in trouble with joint parenting issues.
Right.
But, she has a cell phone. I introduced her to the cell phone world because I wanted control over it. I had Apple has features where you can parent mode or whatever. Right. She has a phone now, but without exposing too much of how me and my ex don't agree on everything. She doesn't bring her phone over here because her mom won't let her. And it's because her mom tells her, I'll go through her phone. And I look at my daughter and I say, I absolutely will go through your phone.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I don't understand why she's not. And she probably is. Yeah. I was like, she probably is going through your phone. But just the idea of saying she doesn't want me to go through her phone. I'm like, what? I don't understand that. And we're not going to get into weird parenting disagreement stuff. But I am 100% and I'm not going to lie to my daughter about it either. I'm not going to be like, I would never go through your phone. I'd be like, I will absolutely go through your phone.
And you should.
Yes.
Because it's not about being their friend.
This whole episode is my argument of yes, you should. Yes, parents.
You should actually have her watch this episode. And if she won't watch this episode, you can send her another interview.
Oh my God.
And she can watch that interview.
You're going to get me in so much trouble on YouTube and with my ex.
Well, here's the thing though, because like I said, I came from a divorced household too, right? Not me personally, but I'm divorced. So my son comes from divorced parents. And I always tried to maintain that if you do what's best for your kid and love your kid more than you dislike your ex, you won't go wrong. right?
And I feel like that's usually the case. There's bitterness. I don't know.
You'll get through it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I can only do so much. And
Right.
so I do what I can do with my daughter and teach her the things that I can teach her and how to be aware.
Right.
And
But maybe share that story with my cousin. I mean, my cousin never thought that would ever happen to them either, you know?
well, no one thinks anything. Everyone thinks we're bulletproof. We
Yep.
all think we're bulletproof. We
Yep.
never think anything's going to happen to us. We're not going to be the one that gets in a car accident. That'll never happen to my kid. That'll never, like, all of that. That's how we walk and live life until it happens to us.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we're hit by reality. And hopefully this actual podcast, this particular episode, wake some people up. And I'm not talking about my ex, but I'm
Yeah.
saying, I mean, in real life, I really hope this, like, gets parents to take a stand. You know,
Right.
I understand because we're in a really weird time period too, with like parenting and how everyone does it and spare the rod, spoil the child. And there's a lot of like, I give my kid privacy. And I'm like, dude, I believe in privacy too. When she's in the bathroom and closing
Right.
the door, like, I believe in privacy. Like, I believe in family privacy and certain things like that, but not when she's a child, like privacy from me and
No.
being in her life and stuff like that. Like,
No.
there's not secrets like that.
Nope.
And so that's not how I'm raising her. But again, it's a joint
Right.
custody thing. So
The
you
other
just hope for
thing-
the best.
The other
you
thing
know?
too is parents should take their phones from their kids at night. They don't need their phones after 9 o'clock
Yeah,
at night.
This is
right?
the life. Yeah, I have, dude. It shut off. Like when I gave her her first phone, like I was in control of, and it didn't have like where she could call anywhere, anytime. It was very like she needed to be. It was just mostly for like when she was home, little stuff.
Right.
But yes, it would shut down. It would be like you cannot use your phone
Right.
other than for emergency phone calls
Yep.
after 8 o'clock. It
But
shuts
had
off.
I done that, even when he was 16, I would have seen those messages coming through, right?
Now you're getting into the hard spot. 16-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
17-year-old. I'm an adult.
Right.
I'm an adult.
Yeah, and I
You
told
know,
him because I
that's
would
hard.
drown him from his phone. I'm like, this is my phone.
I think
You're
you
not
can't,
paying for
you
it.
live in my house.
Right.
I'm paying the bill.
Right.
Yeah. So
You're
I
not
have
paying
very
for
old
it.
school. I'm the same way. You know, like you live in my house.
Yep.
You know, this is how it's going to be. And I told her. I told my daughter. I was like, if you know. I will go through. I'll go through your bag. I'll go through. If I feel I'm not like like
Right.
just for no reason.
Me either.
You know,
Like,
it's not
and
like
that's
I'm
what
bored.
I got accused of,
I'm
but
not
that's not
bored.
what I was doing.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
if I have red flags or something going off in my spirit, you know, if I'm having discernment about something, I'm not gonna like go, oh, you know, and I'll ask her too. I'll do both. I was like, I checked her bag, blah, blah, blah. I talked, you know, like I look, that's who I'm going to be. That's the parenting that I'm going to be.
Yep.
And I encourage all parents to take a stand for your child like that. And I know it's not going to be easy. I know it sounds, I'm easier said than done. 'Cause we just said 16-year-old, 17-year-old at 18. Where do you even, that's a legal adult.
Right.
Like, do you just be like, well, you live in my house, I want to look at your phone? Well, they're a legal adult. Like, so now it is different.
I think it's after they graduate high school. There's even
Right.
laws out there that state, so let's say that
18, but in high school.
right, 18 but in high school,
Right.
if that teacher grooms that kid even
Uh-huh.
at 18 but still in high school, it's illegal.
Authority figure, all
Yes,
of that. Yeah.
it's
So
illegal.
that, see what I mean? Like it's all, there's like little lines to this and how this works. And I'm the same way.
Yeah.
So
Yep. And then we ended up we had with America's Future. So they're all about protecting kids. So they have a whole thing about, you know, defending children. And so we ended up having General Flynn.
is this how you went to Mar-a-Lago?
This is getting to the story.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
I was like, how'd you get to Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah. So we ended up having General Flynn and Mary Flynn O'Neill with America's Future. So you can go to americasfuture.net, and they came out at our church, and we had a summit. So it was Friday night, all day Saturday. And we had Liz Crokin was there. I don't know if you know who Liz Crokin is. Pizzagate.
Oh, okay. I've heard of that.
Yep. So Liz Crokin was the one who kind of busted Pizzagate wide open.
This
with the WikiLeaks emails.
YouTube algorithm just shooting down every.
There you go.
The longer we go,
Yep. And,
we're fighting the algorithms on this one.
Mike Smith from Out of Shadows, they all came out to the church. And you can actually still find that event on the Rumble channel for the church, for Fox River Lutheran Church. So the Friday night event is still up and running. It's also, I think, up and running on their Rumble channel for America's Future. And it took place in, I was on January 26th of last year of 23, or 24, sorry.
So that's right.
January
General
26th
Flynn
of
came
24.
out here too,
Yes.
out here in Norway. Is that Seneca,
Fox
Norway?
River.
Yeah, Fox
Yeah.
River Lutheran.
Yeah, he came out twice.
So cool.
had another event where he came out as well. But they came out for this event. And then after they heard me speak and what I've been working on, so they have asked me to come to another event. So I'm speaking at another event with them in
Very
Wisconsin, the end of April. So it's the last weekend of April. So
That's
if anybody's
coming
in
up.
Wisconsin, go on to their website, americasfuture.net, and you can sign up there and register. It's only $35.
Come say hi. Come say hi.
Yeah, you can come say hi.
I saw you on that
But-
podcast.
Yeah, it's only $35, and it's Friday night, all day Saturday. General Flynn will be there, and Tara Lee Rodas, who is the DHS whistleblower, she will also be there. She's the one who did the whistleblowing about the, at first it was the 80,000 kids that were missing. Now we're up to I think 300,
350. Who knows?
300,
And counting.
500,000.
And they think it's more.
Yeah. Yep. So Tara will be there too, but we're all trying to work together to just try and save these kids. So anyway, Mar-a-Lago, so America's Future was doing an event at Mar-a-Lago. They had somebody donate a full table of 10. And so they held a contest.
Right.
And the contest was, what are you doing to help protect this country? And what are you doing for this country, right? So I'm like, well, I'm going to go ahead and throw my name in the hat. So I throw it all in there and end up winning one of the spots. But here's the funny thing is I asked Mary Flynn, I said, did you and General Flynn pick the winners? She goes, we have no idea who the winners are. And she said that was
It just
actually done
happened.
by my other sister,
Wow.
who I don't know. And so I actually was one of the people picked. And so was one of my friends. So
One of those God moments again. That's
Yep.
cool.
So it was great. We went down there, and then one of the funniest things was we were in an area that we weren't supposed to be in, but didn't realize we weren't supposed to be there until we went up there. And we look over, and Mike Tyson was having dinner with his family. And so I'm looking over, I'm like waving, he waves. I'm like, picture? He's like, gives me the 1 minute finger, right? But then we end up, we were kind of getting kicked out. So we stood up and we were getting ready to leave. And he comes over. He's like, do you want to get that picture real quick? And he was so kind and so nice. It was
That's so
awesome.
funny.
But here's the funny part is we're leaving and going down these stairs. And so we were brought onto the campus by buses from the hotel. So the last bus is rolling up and it's across this whole big grassy area, front yard, right? And so we start running, and I have like a pantsuit on, and I have like slide-in shoes. And so I took my shoes off because my feet were slipping out. So I took my shoes off. Now I'm running, and the grass is soaked, so my feet are getting soaked. I'm like, my socks are soaked. My sister-in-law's with me, and she's running, looking back. She's like, why do you have socks on? Like, it was this whole thing. And we get over there, and the Secret Service, they're just laughing at us, right? Like, you guys do realize you're on video right now, and everybody's laughing at you. I'm like, that's cool. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, can we get a copy of that? It would be so fun. But yeah, so it was a great time. President Trump was there, and he did speak, and just talking about saving this country. And it breaks my heart that people think that he's such an awful person, because he's really all about the kids and wants to save the kids. And I don't think a lot of people realize this, but he actually signed 9 bills into law when he was in the last time against human and child trafficking.
Right.
And one of them was Executive Order 13818, which actually seizes the assets of anyone convicted of trafficking. So you have all these people with Doge right now, right? They're offshoring their money because they're $200,000 a year salaried people, but they're multimillionaires, and they're offshoring all their money. And people think it's because of what they're finding in Doge. I'm like, so this Epstein list is supposed to drop. So if they're on this Epstein list and they're found guilty and convicted of trafficking,
We'll see if we ever get that.
right? But if they're convicted of trafficking, now their assets are seized, and they use that money to help the victims, set up safe houses, whatever they got to do with that money. But I think that could be part of the reason they're offshoring their money, not just because of what's happening with Doge.
We are living in crazy times, that's for sure. And the fact that you got to be a part of like history, like literally, like
Right.
like you're a part of history, and you're a part of this movement in a way bigger way than I think people even realized.
Yeah.
It's cool that it all ended up even getting to go there at a very cool time.
Yeah.
Like that's this
Yeah.
whole timing. This is also, I feel like we're watching history unfold every single day.
I feel very blessed though, and really like all of the glory goes to God, because if you listen to what he's telling you to do, the doors are going to open, right? So he opened the doors to these reps and senators. He opened the door to
But it
Allie
didn't
Hopper.
seem like it was opening, right? Like, think about it. As you describe
Not
your
at the
story,
time.
it's not like you're like, oh, and then a door opened, and then I did this, and a door opened.
No.
I'm hearing that, but I'm also hearing this door slammed in my face. This door was slammed in my face.
Yep.
I was pushed down. I was ridiculed. I was like, I'm actually hearing a lot of pushback. So it doesn't sound like this great, awesome story of doors opening, but truly, that's how God works. Like,
Right.
I genuinely feel like we can see a pattern in what you went through and how God does that. Even how people will say like Trump needed to lose in 2020 so we can be where we are today. And like, that's kind of like, even you had to wait and lose so that law could be in
Right.
2013. You had to go through these things, but you were being obedient. And God doesn't require sacrifice from us, but he does want our obedience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when we do see the most fruit, in spite of the season we're in. Like, you can be like, oh, I'm in this season of going through, and I'm struggling, and now I'm going through PTSD and coping with my child, and I'm in this season, but God is still putting fruit and using what the enemy intended for evil
Yep.
for good in so many ways that went way beyond what you could have ever imagined. And that goosebump moment in this episode when you were sharing about like how they used your case, and to the point now it's just like actually changing the face of America.
Right.
and a lot of what's going on. I think this is like an amazing situation. So let me ask you about you. Who are you as the woman? Like, where did you how did you become that person that's just gonna, oh, I'm this mama bear? Like, and was this always faith? Like, are you leaning on God through all of this, or what? Like, where was your faith in all of this? How were you getting through this? And were you raised a Christian, or what? Like, how?
So
In your household, even?
yes, I think God's been preparing me for this time my entire life. I was raised a Christian. We didn't go to church all the time. My grandmother did, though. My sister and I come from a family of 6 kids, and my younger sister and I would go to church all the time with my grandmother.
Yeah.
Loved Sunday school, right? Like, loved
Hanging out with
playing
the
and hanging out and
friends.
playing games and all of that, right?
Jesus loves
So,
me.
right. It's exactly it, right? So in here at Fox River, they play a lot of the old
Yeah.
music, right?
Yeah, they do.
And there's times I find myself tearing up because I think about like going to church with my grandma. Those were the songs that we were singing. Like, so it's awesome. But, like a lot of kids, you just kind of fall away. You don't really follow. But I'll tell you what, when something bad happens to you, I told you the first place I went after I left that principal's office. I went to the local church. And there had been times I'd go to different churches as an adult, and like, I just didn't feel comfortable, couldn't feel like I was getting the message, and I couldn't understand the Bible very well. But the very first place that I turned when this happened, I didn't call my husband, I didn't call my parents, I went to the church. And
Specifically,
it was
a
a
different church?
Presbyterian church in Morris.
just seeking God. Like, God, I need
Right.
you.
Right. We grew up Presbyterian, so I'm like, well, I'm going to go to the Presbyterian
Yeah.
church. And
That's what I know.
right, that's what I know. And so I went there, and he sat with me, and he said, no, and I was a hot mess. Like, this is the first time this guy's meeting me, and I am like bawling. Like, it was bad. And
Poor guy.
I know, right? I felt so bad. I left there. I'm like, oh my gosh, he probably thinks I'm a lunatic.
It's his job.
Yeah, I guess. But it turns out that he was actually a neighbor of mine.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then years later, I knew him professionally too. And so I reminded him of that conversation. He got tears in his eyes. Like, that was you. I'm like, yeah.
So
was
that
me.
conversation, was that like I understand you had like some sort of relationship with God where you're like seeking him, but you're not living for him, and you're kind of maybe living in the world,
Yeah.
It's like your prodigal daughter era. I don't know. You can describe it many ways, but where was this point where like, because I know I can even see it in how you're talking about like God became your strength at one point through
Yes.
this. I can tell like there's this point where it went from doing this in your own ability to you just leaning on God.
It was
through all of
COVID.
this.
There are so many things that came good out of COVID, right?
I say this all the time. I say
right?
this all the time.
Yep. Having Zoom meetings,
But
right?
it's a lot-
Not having to waste your time traveling somewhere, right? So there's a lot
It
of good.
exposed a lot of things.
Exposed
like
a lot of things. Yep.
So it shined the light on a lot of.
Yep. So when I went to the very first Reawaken event, it was called the Health and Freedom Conference at the time because they didn't want to get banned, right? So I go there, and General Flynn was there, And there was this powerful, dynamic pastor, because there were a bunch of pastors that were there too. But it was Pastor Greg Locke out of Tennessee.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he came out and he was speaking.
He's a fire and brimstone kind of preacher.
He is.
Yep.
And I'm telling you what, there were 4,000 people there. And when he came out and was speaking, they all disappeared. And he was talking right to me. And he said, get in the fight and get in this game. So I'm like, okay. So I left there and I'm like, I need to find a church. And I couldn't really find one at the time. And I dressed up the next Sunday, went down to the river down in Morris, and I sat at a picnic table and I watched Pastor Locke online and did that for a few weeks. And then somebody sent through in a group that I'm in one of Pastor Kevin's sermons. I'm like, oh my gosh, like these two people are kind of the same, right? Like Pastor Kevin is so powerful. He doesn't get as fiery as Greg Locke, but their messages are the same. It's very biblically driven. Everything is out of the Bible. They don't mess around. They talk about Revelation. They talk about all of it. They talk about, the LGBTQ community. They talk about politics. They talk about everything. And they bring a lot of it back to the Constitution.
Anything you're going to see on your news feed when you're scrolling Facebook or X or whatever, that's what they're going to talk about too, because it's something that's in your life.
Everything.
So, yeah.
And I love how Pastor Kevin can actually bring it right back to the Constitution and brings it back to the Bible. So he brings everyday stuff to the Bible, and I can relate to that. So I'm doing like a double feature, right? So I'm watching Pastor Locke, then I watch Pastor Kevin, and then about 3 or 4 weeks later, somebody goes, he's just right over here in Sheridan. I'm like, what? I had no idea. So I'm like, I went then to the next week. I went and went up and introduced myself afterward, and I said, so are you a 501c3 organization? And he said, no, we're not. And he kind of chuckled. He goes, nobody's ever asked me that as their first question. I said, I just need to know if you're beholden to the government and if you're ever going to shut down again. And he said, no, we are not. And no, we will never shut down again. We will never shut our doors again. Yeah. I said, I'll see you next week.
Yeah.
So that's what started that. And I think going to that church, he's what brought me there, but the people and the congregation that are there, they're what keeps me there. And I feel very welcome there, and I can understand the Bible there. I think that was my whole turning point, was getting to the church. And then, wanted to have an event there. And so Dr. McCullough, I had met him he was speaking at an event up north, and I left church a little early that day, went up and got in line behind him for the buffet. And I said, I have a couple questions for you. He's like, well, why don't you come and have lunch with me? I'm like, okay. So I sit down and have lunch with him. And I said, we had just had Dr. Artis Zoom in with us. And I said, would you be willing to Zoom in with us to kind of explain things about COVID and what you're working on? He said, well, it's much more effective in person. I said, so you'd come in person to like Fox River Lutheran Church in Sheridan, Illinois? He goes, you pay my ticket, I'll come. I'm like, okay. So I booked his ticket like 2 days later. Yeah. I wasn't going to let him forget about it. And he flew in and out, came in that day, and we had like an all-day event at the church and brought in 400 people. And then we did another event with the Mama Bears from Iowa and AJ DePriest, who was actually exposing all the ESSER money that was going on. So the ESSER funds were tied to COVID, and that was the money that the schools were getting. Yeah. Like many schools were getting multi-million dollars from the government to toe the line and mask these kids up and push a vaccine, and nobody knew about that money. So she was exposing that. And then we ended up having that event then with General Flynn. It was an outdoor, tent event, and had several people come and speak that day. And Pastor Kevin, we had, I think, 6 people come to Christ that day. And it's just, it's been amazing.
I heard his bodyguard, General Flynn's bodyguard, came
Kyle.
to Christ that day.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just been amazing, like what's been happening. That's why I said God's been opening all these doors. Even though doors were getting shut in my face, all these other doors are opening. Right. But it's because we're trying to do the right thing, right? We're trying to save these kids and listen and being obedient. And so I think that's really where I started really walking with Christ more, was when I started going to church there back in July of 21. And so it feels like I've been there for a long time, but I haven't really been there a long time. And when the first time when I actually...
Well, he's been there for a long time.
When I was trying to get General Flynn to come the first time, and talking to council, I got a lot of pushback initially because, people are like, is General Flynn good? Is he bad? All of this back and forth nonsense. Yeah. And, they didn't know who I was. And so I think they thought that I was trying to disrupt the church.
You're
and
a lobbyist.
Right.
You're just like some lobbyist bringing in politics into the church.
Right. When I'm just a mom and I'm a physical therapist and I'm just trying to do what I think I'm supposed to be doing and trying to wake people up to what's really going on, you know. And my husband, you know, while he was a believer, he wasn't really walking with Christ either. And, you know, he would listen to Pastor Kevin online. I'm like, why can't you just come to church with me? He's like, I like to sleep in. I'm like, so can you just come to church? So he's been coming to church with me too. And he works every other weekend, but the days he doesn't work, he comes to church. And otherwise he's listening online too. And if he can't listen that day, he'll listen later. So
basically this whole incident not only elevated and saved lives and stuff like this, but this also like encouraged your own personal relationship with God, but also your family.
Yes.
You know, your husband, I'm not sure.
And my son too.
Your son too. I was curious.
Yeah, because
I was wanting to ask.
Yeah, he, you know, while I was praying for him, like, God, you know, let him see that you are the way, right? And and he wasn't really going to church, but then he started reading the Bible. You know, I was praying that he would actually have a relationship, so he started reading the Bible. And the place where he's working now, it's a military boarding school, and so this is God's humor as part of his job. He has to take the kids to church on Sundays.
Nice.
So there you go. So now he's going to church, and
that's so funny.
Yeah, and he talks about the Bible when he's helping these kids, and you know, lets them understand that there is this higher power, and he's come a long way.
Well, there is, and I think your whole story is evidence of literally how God was not only just working in your life, but he was literally working through you, working through your son, working through all the people around you, and now we're. What a crazy, sad, amazing story.
Isn't it? It's like beauty from ashes.
Yeah, it's literally, there's like, I'm like, and we find little ways to laugh about it now that were probably impossible to find, you know, in the moments that you're in, but which is also a testament to the healing, which is also a testament to that things do get better and you don't know what God has in store for you. So even in that darkest moments, in your darkest hours, in the middle of the storm, when your paradigm is all you can see is the dark clouds, there's no way you're going to look back on and like see this moment. You're like, someone's going to tell you like, oh yeah, I'm going to be on a podcast talking about how I did this stuff at Mar-a-Lago, talking to like, you're just like, what? That's not a part of the story. That's not a part of the story. My story is about, you know, Morris and this teacher and this grooming incident, and it went way bigger, and now you're touching lives all over.
Right.
And that's literally how God works. Like, talk about a seed of faith.
Right. That's exactly it, right? That's right.
But I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of this with me. Like, I feel like I don't think I really grasped it. I didn't, you know, just hearing it like in church and you talking a little bit. Like, I don't think it was really clicking.
There's a lot to it. That's the thing is, so people really need to hear the whole story to really get the gravity of the entire situation.
Yeah, it's an in-depth.
It is.
There's a lot of layers to your story because it starts off like season 1 and you don't even realize where it's going by season 5. And that's like, but I really appreciate you sharing this. I feel like I really hope God uses this, you know, as like a testimony of many ways: healing, how he works, perseverance, also helping parents understand like the dangers and that to be active in your child's social media life. Man, we live in crazy times. We are literally all figuring this out together, even as parents. Like I went through my, you know, internet and phones and figuring stuff out, but like things are so fast and AI and technology.
And that's the thing is the laws don't keep up with the technology.
No.
You know, so.
No, apparently not. Like that's what part of my shock was literally you being like, oh, this was the first time this law ever happened. Like, wait, what? Oh, this is the first time. Oh, and like, I'm just like, this seems like it should have been happening way long ago. Like, but nope. But here we are. Yeah, I want people to be able to follow you. I know you have your own website, MichellePeterson.org, right? MichellePeterson.org, and they can pretty much, that's like a hub for most of your stuff.
Yep. There's tabs at the top. There's a tab at the top that says Andrew's Law, and in that tab are all of the grooming laws and any grooming bills that we have access to. So we're uploading those on there. There's also a contact page on there. So
I was going to say, if someone wants to get a hold of you.
There's an email that's on there that they can email. It goes directly to me. So
Perfect.
they can email that. It'll come right to me. But there's all kinds of information. There's a couple other podcasts on there too. They can follow me on X. It's Michelle Pete 77. So Michelle Pete 77. And so you can follow me on X. And I have Facebook, but I would say a lot of my stuff is really on X.
Well, that's probably because you can't say a lot of things on a lot of other platforms anyways.
Actually, it's gotten better on Facebook.
It's gotten a little bit better on Facebook. It's gotten a little bit better.
I'll screenshot stuff from X.
I'm still super restricted.
And throw it over there.
I'm super
Facebook.
restricted. They're never going to lift it. I'm going to have to get like a person to come like look at my case and be like, oh yeah, they just sort of permanently put this on you. But yeah, I talked about one of the other episodes. I basically like 2 weeks before the election, they just totally put some weird thing on me. It was like, we're going to not let you comment or do anything on people's and then ever since then, just I can comment on people's stuff now, but there's like a permanent restriction I'm forever under on Facebook. It's okay. I wear it like a badge of armor. It's a badge of armor.
I have some friends they're like on profile number 12.
Oh,
like
see,
they make up
I
all
never
these names.
remade it. I just was like, no, I'm keeping the original. So I just like, dude, it was so hard to get me on Facebook. I was on MySpace before that. And so I was like, Facebook is dumb. I'm on MySpace. And then like, here I am now. Like, I'm like, I don't want to get an X. I was fighting Twitter. I did not have a Twitter. And then like once it became X and everything else.
And if people want the truth, they need to go on Twitter and get a Twitter account.
Yeah. Get on
an
X
account
for real.
Yes.
Like I tell
X
people, like,
has everything on
you're
there.
3 days behind.
Woo.
You are like 3 days behind on the news. First of all, if you are not on X, 1, 2, like these are not endorsements. We're not endorsing,
right,
no paid advertisements from Bark, no paid advertisements from, any of these things. But definitely.
Yeah. I do have an affiliate link with Bark though, because I talk about them all the time.
Okay, is it on your website?
So if they go on my website, there is an affiliate link on there.
If you are interested in Bark, do it this way. So this way we can have an affiliate.
Yeah, because there's a donate spot on there too. Because when I go to do these speaking things, I'm using my own vacation time. I'm paying for everything. So I'm using that money to actually help offset the cost of travel. Like, and if I go to testify in any of these hearings, it's to help with that sort of stuff.
Oh, that's perfect way. And another thing, guys, where you can support and also do something for your own self and your own family. So I guess we ended up endorsing Bark after all.
Yes, but not X.
No. So, but I definitely would recommend it. But be careful because it's not filtered. Like, so you are going to run, like, it's not a child's platform. That is a kid should not have X.
No.
Period. So let that be said. But like news wise, if you want to be up to date on news, I don't know a better way of getting that news. Like,
that's right.
Like it lickety split. Like I'm getting news at 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock, when they're posting. I'm like, dude, I know before you even wake up.
Right.
So thank you again for that. I'm going to tell everyone, for those of you that like these faith conversations, do us a favor, hit subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment, tell us what you like, tell us what you didn't like, tell us anything you really want, but get this out there. I would recommend sharing this video on multiple platforms. Share it with people that you think maybe need to hear this. Don't share this with my ex, please. Oh my gosh, I got myself in trouble. All right. Besides that, let's see. Also, we have a website too. www.msmink.com. So MSMInk.com. It's kind of our hub too, so you can check us out there. We got stuff, the gospel for anyone that's interested in getting to know Jesus a little more, podcast stuff, articles, just a whole bunch of stuff that you can hang out on the website. Aside from that, let me think. I think that's kind of it. Just kind of winding it down. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. Oh, yes, we do have a Patreon. We want to get people on Patreon. Just so you guys understand what Patreon is, it's just a way that you sign up, and it's like you can monthly give. So you can put $1. You could say, I want to give $1. Every month, $1 will be pulled from however you sign up, and that way it could go into the ministry. So we do have that. I'm trying to give a hoodie there. I have a hoodie there available for people that become Patreon. I think I have two of you guys, so we're doing good. It's better than none. So check that out if you guys are interested in doing like a Patreon. That way you can help support the ministry. And I think that's it. We're going to kind of wind it down. And I thank you so much for sharing all of this. This was a really good one for me.
Yeah.
So thank you. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank
All
you.
right, guys. You guys have a good one. Bye.